Are you into shadow work? Do you spend a lot of time working on your shadows, studying it? In this video, I'm going to be talking about a few things in relation to shadow work, what it is, the best way to approach it, and some perceptions you can shift to help you work through it. My name is Adam. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm a freedom and clarity coach. I help people get freedom from their past, their traumas, and their wounds, and I help them get clarity on their vision and what to do to create their best life. Before we get started, I just want to let you know I'm doing some free breakthrough calls. There's a link pinned in the comment section below. These are amazing calls. They're 30-minute calls where we go over your vision for your life, what's stopping you, and some things that you can do to step into your power. Now, I want to talk just briefly about like the essence of what shadow work is. So shadow work is basically integration, to make it really short and simple. Shadow work is finding all of the pieces and parts of you that have broken off from the whole or are now in separation or unconsciousness and bringing them into the light. So the rest of yourself, because all you are is infinite love and consciousness to begin with. Now, what happens is when we undergo some sort of trauma, a piece of us will break off and splinter. And it sticks out with sort of a jagged edge. And a lot of times it goes into the unconscious and we're not aware of it anymore. But what it does is, because it's like standing out so much, it kind of imbues and taints our life and our perception like through and through. So it's very difficult to have an experience outside of being haunted by that trauma, whether or not you have actual recurring memories or you just have like a state of shutdown or emotion. So what shadow work is basically is it's going into the dark, and the dark is just those pieces that you are not aware of. It's not bad, and bringing it into the light. So a good example of this is, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Shawshank Redemption. It was many, many years ago with Tim Robbins, but I'll briefly explain it anyway. So Tim Robbins' character got falsely accused for something and was arrested and put in prison for a long time. And he knew he didn't deserve to be in there, and he wasn't going to be let out. So he knew he had to escape. So what he would do is, in his cell, he got this little chisel or axe thing, and he would start to chip away at the wall. And he was digging a hole in the wall so eventually he could crawl through the wall and find a way out of the prison. But granted, this was going to take a very, very long time, and he needed to hide the hole he was digging, so he got this poster to put over the wall. And also, if he did too much at once, all of this dirt would have filled up his cell, and the warden or the prison guards would have seen it. So he did a little bit at a time. He would chisel away, and some dirt would fall, and he'd put the dirt in his pants, and he'd walk out onto the prison yard and just dump it out his pants a little bit at a time. This is how you want to do shadow work. Okay, if you do too much at once, if you focus too much on the shadow, you can overwhelm yourself and just re-traumatize yourself. So in trauma healing, the way they describe this is there's a trauma vortex, which is like an energy vortex, and there's a healing vortex. Now, if you're in a lot of trauma, you don't have much of a healing vortex. So the point is, you want to build the healing vortex as much as possible, or build the light as much as possible, so you then can get the trauma or the shadow a little bit at a time and bring it into the light and transmute it. So you don't just want to go straight into the shadow and spend all the time in the shadow, or you just end up stuck in the dark. And what can happen is a lot of people, when they get into shadow work, kind of get into the identity of like going into the darkness and fighting the darkness, and they don't really understand the importance of building the light and building the healing vortex, and everything is what you believe. So you can create this belief, like if you don't understand that the point is to build the healing and the light first, you can just run around in circles forever, like in trauma. And it's a little bit better, sort of, than people who are completely unconscious and not dealing with their stuff at all. But a lot of people get almost addicted to shadow work and they don't really know how to actually heal. Well, this is how you do it. So how do you approach shadow work? Well, like I said, you want to approach it as what you're doing essentially is you're taking the pieces of yourself that got sort of disavowed and separated, and you're basically shining your own loving awareness onto them. They didn't do it like there's nothing wrong with them. The shadow isn't darkness because it's bad. You're not, there's no need to feel guilt or shame, though I know a lot of times we do. But essentially the shame is because these pieces are stuck from the other, locked away from the other part of your loving self. And when you understand that this overall is the goal, it makes it a lot easier. So what you're doing is you're looking at the parts of yourself that feel less than, unworthy, lost in the dark, and you're just finding them little by little and embracing them. What you're not doing is trying to clear them and get rid of them. Now you can clear stuff, you can clear pieces, but essentially the clearing is really just dissolving it into love and light. You don't want to just push it away, separate yourself from it, push it off, pretend like it's a different person. That's the old me, it's not the new me. It's all part of you. And the more you see it as all valid, the easier it is to heal it. Now, what are a few perceptions and things that you can do to help make this process easier? Well, it can be a little tricky because if you're in a lot of trauma, there's not a whole lot of love or a healing vortex sometimes at first. So one thing you can do is count your wins, right? Acknowledge yourself for all of the good things you have done or that you do, even if it's just something small, like I'm going to start doing shadow work. Well, that's a step forward. So that's something to congratulate yourself for. And do that as much and as often as you can. Also, anything that brings you joy helps to build the healing vortex. Anything that brings you joy and brings you into your body. So, yoga, dancing, martial arts is good too if you like it. Anything that makes you feel in touch with your nervous system in a sort of present way. Meditation as well. Another thing you can do if you're very stuck in the shadow and you don't have a lot of the healing vortex yet is you can work with somebody else, because when you work with someone else, they actually provide some of the love and the healing energy for you in order to build that in yourself. So eventually you don't need them so much because you can provide your own light to the pieces of yourself that got disavowed or stuck in the darkness or the shadow. A third thing that you can do is upgrade your identity. Now, ultimately, we can identify with the shadow. That's just who we are. So everything happens in increments, little by little by little. And I'll give you an example of how I did this. So I was a heroin addict for a long time, for 10 years. And ultimately, I would have been okay with it if I just did it for 2 years, because the first year or so is actually really fun. I don't recommend it for anybody, but it's fun for a little while and then it becomes miserable. But 2 years would have been fine for me because I actually like the idea of going into the dark a bit and going into a sticky situation and then overcoming it, because it gives you a strength and a resilience and a courage and this belief in yourself, and it builds character. But I spent so long in there and I went so far down that it took way too much of my life. So when I came out, I had massive amounts of shame and regret because I felt like I wasted everything. And I went so far down. I was so filled with the darkness and the shadow. I couldn't find hardly anything that made me feel good about myself. So it took a long time for me because I had such a judgment and a condemnation of myself for what I did. Now, if I'd just been able to be oh, that's okay, no problem, I love myself, I could have healed a lot of it much faster. But when we have these judgments and belief systems and then identities with being a loser or a piece of shit like I had, it makes it really hard. So one of the things that I began to cultivate was I took all of my addict energy and I channeled it into my healing process. And, I went and I saw a lot of healers and they provided a lot of love and support. And I was in a rehab that was very difficult, but it was very supportive too. And I slowly built the healing vortex and little by little started healing those parts of me. And then what I did was I upgraded my identity, and then I started to see myself as this person who overcame all of this horrible, awful stuff, which made me strong. And it made me feel good about myself for being triumphant. So that kind of took my confidence up another level, and it gave me a little more love and a little more light to heal the trauma with. Now, I don't recommend staying in this I'm a badass survivor identity, because on a co-creational reality which we live in, what that then does is it starts to drawing situations where you're not so much a loser, but you draw in situations to show yourself, that you're this fighter and you can overcome trauma. So you just keep drawing in trauma to overcome. And that's not anywhere near as high vibrational as just having infinite love and compassion for yourself, and therefore just kind of creating this massive healing vortex for so much of the shadow to come into to dissolve. Now, one of the last perceptions and most important things to understand to help you, begin to really heal the shadow is the understanding of divine neutrality. It's so important. Because one of the things that keeps us in the shadow, like I said, is the judgment, the condemnation, the belief that we were bad, the belief that we did something wrong, the belief that whatever we did, we shouldn't have done. Like, shame on you. That's where the guilt, the shame, the judgment comes from. And with childhood trauma, it's natural to develop this perspective when we had things happen to us that were out of our control. But as adults now, we have the ability to take our power back from it. So divine neutrality essentially means that there is no right and wrong, good and bad, fundamentally in the universe. Now, yes, in 3D, we want to have like laws and rules. Thou shalt not kill. That's a good rule. We want to keep that one, right? But ultimately, as souls, we're actually here to experience everything. The dark as much as the light. Now, it's changing. We're coming out of the dark more and more. But anything that you did, you were supposed to do in some way. Some part of you was meant to learn it. It's all just an experience, an experiment with energy. And when you withdraw yourself from even like the light and the dark and even the healing vortex and the trauma vortex, you go beyond that and you transcend it to where everything is simply is, but it's like infinite love, and that's what you are. So everything that you did, I'm not saying keep like being abusive or mean, I'm not saying that, but everything that you did essentially was just an experience to learn and grow from. And everyone on this planet at some point in time has been the victim and the perpetrator. We're meant to explore those things. And when you really understand that, you kind of go beyond the paradigm, and the shadow and the light begin to merge and become one. And the other thing to understand is, because we're here to experience everything, the trauma and the shadow and all the things that you went through are actually part of the process. See, when we see it as a mistake, we write it off. We're like, I don't want to be that person, that loser, that person who fucked up, that was all wrong. And what that does is it resists, because the issue is in the resistance. When we resist ourselves, or when we resist anything, that's when it gets worse. Everything heals in a state of complete love and acceptance of what is. So when you understand that everything that you went through has a place in leading to you to where you're meant to go, then you don't invalidate your whole past. Because that's how the shadow's created. You invalidate a part of yourself. You cut a part of yourself off from yourself and throw it in the dark because you don't want to look at it because it's bad and it's been judged, and you resist it. So when you understand that it's all part of it, it begins to connect and integrate to the rest of you. And that's when it really begins to heal. And then you don't just get lost, like going into the shadow, fighting the shadow separate from the light, or trying to throw the shadow out or clear it, still separating from the other parts of you. You see it as valid, you embrace it, you bring it into the wholeness of your being, and it dissolves. And it's tricky because there's so many layers of our subconscious, and there's layers in our body, and we go through things little by little, and you can't always just have this mass awakening and heal everything at once. It would throw your nervous system into complete disarray. But the more you can adopt that perception and understand it, the less like finicky and arduous it has to be. So I hope this helps. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. If you want a little more help healing some of your shadow, I have a free energy clearing in the description below. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very, very much. I look forward to seeing you next time, and peace.